The farmer stood at the fence line, his eyes tracing the bony ridges along the backs of his herd. Their coats, once sleek, now bristled like coarse wire. He watched them shuffle awkwardly in the Kentucky heat, their hooves so overgrown they curled like Turkish slippers. All of them clustered in that one new pasture, grazing on the tall, tough grass he'd been so proud to cultivate from wild seed. He walked the field, his boots crushing the resilient stems. The grass was a survivor. It had thrived through drought and resisted the cattle's constant cropping. Yet here were the results: listless animals losing weight despite ample feed. His initial pride curdled into a deep, gnawing suspicion. Something in this vibrant green pasture, this apparent bounty, was leaching the vitality from his livestock. The mystery was rooted in the very seeds he had collected. Unknowingly, he had brought more than just grass into his fields. He had transplanted a hidden biological package, a symbiotic fungus living entirely within the plant. This unseen passenger was the source of the trouble, already manufacturing its chemical defense within the stems his cattle consumed every day. Kentucky 31. Tall fescue spread like a green tide across the American South. By the 1940s, millions of acres had been converted to this resilient grass. Farmers celebrated its deep roots that withstood drought and its stubborn refusal to die even under the heaviest grazing. But as the pastures thickened, something else began to take root. A creeping, unexplained sickness among the herds. The first signs were subtle. A cow would stand apart from the herd, shifting its weight uncomfortably. Then its hooves would swell, the skin turning a waxy, cold white. The condition farmers called fescue foot wasn't a simple limp, it was gangrene. Blood flow to the extremities had simply stopped. Tails and the tips of ears could blacken and slough off, as if frostbitten in the middle of a warm summer. Veterinarians were baffled. The grass looked lush and healthy, yet it was crippling the livestock that depended on it. Theories swirled. Was it a mineral deficiency? A new virus? The connection was undeniable. Cattle on old native pastures remained healthy, while those grazing the modern Kentucky 31 developed these horrific symptoms. The very trait that made the grass a miracle for the land was making it a slow poison for the animals. For decades, the mystery of the sick cattle had remained locked inside the very grass they ate. In a quiet university laboratory in the 1970s, a plant pathologist finally turned the key. He took a razor blade and made a precise, thin slice through a stem of Kentucky 31 fescue, placing the translucent section on a glass slide under his microscope's bright light. Peering through the lens, his focus shifted from the plant's orderly cellular structure to something alien woven within it, a delicate, branching network of fungal threads, thinner than spider silk, was living inside the plant's own tissues. This was an endophyte, a hidden partner that had evolved to survive not on the surface, but symbiotically within the grass, completely invisible to the naked eye. The discovery was profound. The fungus wasn't a random infection. It was a permanent, inherited resident. The grass provided it shelter and nutrients, and in return, the endophyte produced chemical defenses. Those very compounds, the scientist realized, which made the fescue so resilient against drought and insects, were likely the same toxins now slowly poisoning the cattle from the inside out. While the plant pathologist had found the hidden fungus, the question of what it actually produced remained. In a different laboratory, a chemist poured a fine, tan powder, ground fescue seeds, into a series of glass flasks. He began the meticulous process of extraction, dissolving the powder in solvents to separate its chemical components, hunting for the invisible poison that had crippled livestock across the South. The process yielded not one poison, but a complex cocktail. Through chromatography, dark bands separated on the paper, revealing a family of alkaloid compounds. The chemist focused on one in particular, crystallizing it into a pure form. Its molecular structure, when analyzed, bore a startling resemblance to a historical terror. It was ergovaline, a close chemical cousin to the toxins produced by the ergoty fungus. That link was profound. Ergo had caused St. Anthony's fire in the Middle Ages, its alkaloids constricting blood flow and causing gangrene and hallucinations. Now, a similar compound was being manufactured inside a common pasture grass. The endophyte wasn't just a passenger, it was a biochemical factory, pumping ergot-like poisons directly into the forage consumed by millions of cattle every single day. The chemist's discovery of ergovaline in the lab now found its grim counterpart in the field. On that sweltering Missouri afternoon, the veterinarian's scalpel parted hide and muscle from a cow that had collapsed hours earlier. His thermometer confirmed what the farmer had reported. The animal's internal temperature at death had soared to a lethal 107 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the carcass, the evidence mounted. The vet's gloved fingers traced the network of blood vessels, finding them unnaturally tight and constricted. This vasoconstriction had trapped the animal's own body heat, cooking it from the inside on a day when it should have been cooling itself through its skin. The clinical name for this fatal overheating was summer slump. The connection was now undeniable. The same fungal alkaloids that could rot a hoof in winter were strangling blood flow in summer, preventing cattle from regulating their temperature. A pasture of Kentucky 31 fescue, robust and green, was not just causing weight loss, it could become a death trap under the summer sun, its hidden poison triggering a catastrophic biological failure. The veterinarian's grim discovery in Missouri sent researchers racing back to their test plots. By the early 1980s, an agronomist named Craig Roberts walked a Kentucky field divided in two. On his left, cattle stood listless in the summer heat, their coats dull. On his right, animals grazed calmly on what looked like identical grass, but wasn't. Roberts knelt, plucking blades from each side. The grass from the left plot was the original Kentucky 31, its stems hiding the toxic endophyte. The grass from the right was a new, experimental variety his team had painstakingly developed. It was endophyte-free. The difference wasn't in the color or height, but in the invisible chemistry within each cell. For years, his team had crossbred plants, searching for one that retained fescue's rugged toughness without the poisonous hitchhiker. Here was the proof. Cattle on the new grass showed no elevated body temperature, no constricted blood flow, no signs of the summer slump. The problem had been isolated not just to a fungus, but to a specific removable trait. The agronomist's promising endophyte-free fescue withered under real-world pressure. Within a single grazing season, the lush test plots turned to bare earth. Without its fungal partner, the grass lost its drought resistance, its roots failed to anchor, and cattle trampled it into dust. The solution had created a new problem, a grass that couldn't survive the very pastures it was meant to save. Back in sterile growth chambers, researchers combed through fungal collections from around the world. Their gloved hands manipulated petri dishes, searching for a strain that could live inside the fescue without secreting poison. They found their candidate in a European meadow, a benign endophyte that formed the same protective bond with the plant, but whose chemistry lacked the genetic instructions to manufacture ergot-like alkaloids. The breakthrough was a microscopic graft. Using precise techniques, they introduced the friendly fungus into sterile fescue seeds. In warm incubators, the new partnership took root. The resulting grass grew with the legendary toughness of Kentucky 31, its blades resilient, its roots deep, but its internal chemistry was silent, a symbiosis that offered shelter without the hidden cost of venom. The breakthrough of the friendly endophyte offered a solution, but it arrived decades after the toxic grass had already conquered the landscape. By the 1990s, the sheer scale of the infestation became impossible to ignore. Economists at the United States Department of Agriculture finally tallied the nationwide toll, and the numbers were staggering. Their report painted a picture of an agricultural system quietly hemorrhaging money, with losses mounting into the hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. These weren't abstract figures. The report itemized the grim, tangible costs. It calculated the collective weight that millions of cattle failed to gain, their growth stunted by constricted blood flow. It accounted for thousands of failed pregnancies and stillborn calves, reproductive cycles shattered by the fungal poison. And it logged the blunt finality of unexpected deaths in prime herds, animals that simply dropped dead in the summer heat. Every dollar of loss traced a direct line back to the pastures. The problem was now quantified, and its source was undeniable. Tens of millions of acres of that hardy, resilient Kentucky 31 tall fescue, a grass celebrated for saving the land, was now documented as a slow, pervasive poison woven into the very fabric of American farmland. By the turn of the 21st century, the solution arrived not as a single replacement, but as a careful dilution. Farmers across the fescue belt began receiving small, crucial shipments. Each bag was stamped with a new certification, marking seeds that contained what researchers called a friendly endophyte, a fungus that still granted the grass its legendary toughness but had been stripped of its toxic chemistry. The process was methodical. A farmer would walk his existing toxic pasture, calculating the precise ratio. He'd then take a seeder and drill the new certified seed directly into the old sod. This wasn't about eradicating the problem grass overnight. It was about gradually overwhelming it, introducing enough benign plants to lower the overall toxin load in the field to a safe threshold for his herd. Trust in that label was everything, and it was backed by a strict, invisible protocol. Before any seed left the processing plant, technicians sampled each batch, grinding it down and applying genetic markers. Their tests had to confirm two things absolutely: that the friendly endophyte was present and alive, and that the old toxic strain was completely absent. A single contamination could undo years of careful management. So the new, friendly seeds went into the ground, but they didn't replace the old ones. Across the rolling hills of Kentucky and Missouri, the original Kentucky 31 fescue still dominated the landscape. Its deep roots and stubborn persistence meant eradication was impossible. Farmers now managed a dual reality: islands of safe pasture within a sea of resilient toxic grass. This created a permanent low-level threat. A rancher walking his fence line had to constantly monitor where his herd grazed, knowing a prolonged stay on the wrong patch could still trigger summer slump or fescue foot. The fungal endophyte hidden inside each blade had become a fixed feature of the agricultural environment, a toxin woven into the land itself. The story concluded not with a solution, but with a managed coexistence. Vigilance became the new normal, testing soils, rotating pastures, and blending seed types. The economic losses continued, but were now contained. The grass that once promised agricultural salvation had settled into its final role, a permanent resident that demanded constant respect and careful control.